Hello and welcome to another Cornerstone bite-sized video. This one's going to be slightly different, yet another Cornerstone bite-sized video. This one is going to be slightly different in the fact we're going to try and take a topic and break it down into shorter videos. So this is probably going to be the first of 3 parts, which is a bit like the Superman series of films, but hopefully they can maintain the level of the first one and not gradually get worse as the sequels get released. But we're looking at a topic today that you may or may not be aware of. Morning, Nathan. This topic is something called transactional analysis, which is something that comes along in therapy a lot. And again, I'm going to do my funky bit where I put Nathan on the spot and just go, Nate, do you want to kind of explain in this couple of sentences to our lovely viewers, what is transactional analysis?
Yeah, let's do that in 2 sentences. That's easy. Okay, so TA is a very, very big topic, but at its core, you have these things called ego states, and ego states are based off the Freud's id, ego, and superego, but that doesn't matter. So you've got the parent, excuse me, the parent, the adult, and the child, and they all coexist in our brains. I will often talk about them like they are real, actual things that are living and breathing inside your head. That's just how I find it easier to talk about them. Doesn't mean that you actually have 3 people living inside of your head. So we talk about them in terms of when you go into the child ego state, you inhabit it, you act and behave as if you were a child, or you as a child. If you go into your parent ego state, you act and behave as you witness the adults around you as a child behaving, so primarily your parents. And the adult is us being right here, right now, in this current moment, being aware. And the term that is often used is appropriate response to stimulus. Which is it's a really clinical way of phrasing it.
Yeah.
The adult's a bit more tricky, so we're probably going to have to dive into that we'll have to dive into all of them in some detail, but it's that kind of being here right now, not being influenced by childish behavior or that sort of critical parental stuff,
I often
which
find
we're
a good
about
way
to talk about.
Yeah, adult is kind of like encapsulated in this little phrase of clear, present, well-defined, and that kind of, sort of says where we are as an adult state. Just to kind of give, I guess, a bit of a background to some of the stuff that Nathan talked about there. Ego is a Latin word, and it means self. So when we talk about ego, we're not talking necessarily about a sense of, oh, he's got a big ego or an inflated ego. We're just purely talking about the sense of self. And so what we're saying is transactional analysis talks about ego states. So our sense of self has 3 different states if we follow this model, and they are parent, adult, child. And today we will be looking a little bit at the parent ego state and how that might inform our choices in life, how it might inform our actions, and also kind of really, really importantly, in the transactional analysis sense, how other people might receive us, I guess.
Yes. Yeah.
From our parent state.
Yeah. Absolutely. So the first step of transactional analysis is learning about ourselves, and then we learn about other people through that process, because everybody has these 3 ego states in them. And then my ego states are communicating with Chris's ego states constantly, and vice versa, and everybody interact. We've all got these egos, so it gets really complicated really quickly. So we're going to start really simple.
Yeah.
We might get onto transactions at some point, which are the interactions between 2 human beings. But right now, we're going to start with understanding the self, my ego, who I am, and all that sort of stuff, and who you are through watching this video, hopefully. So, Chris, do you have anything to say about the parent?
I think in order to start talking about the parent, we kind of need to do a little bit of personal reflection. I think in order for us to understand our own parental ego state, we need to understand how we perceived our parents when they were our parent, when we were children. Yeah. So already we're bringing an extra sort of terminology, I guess, at this point. But it's quite likely that our parental ego state was informed or is informed by how we were parented ourselves. Now, that goes 2 different ways. We're not going to make this too technical, but as with a lot of clients who will come and sit in front of us here, they kind of default sometimes to a sense of this is how I was parented, therefore that's how my frame of reference sits in terms of parenting, that's how I'm going to be. Or that's how I was parented, it didn't work for me, so I'm going to parent entirely differently. So that brings about a sort of good state of awareness. But parenting, the ego state of parent, in a nutshell, does two things. It nurtures or it criticizes. And that's the two halves of the parent ego state. Language we use with children to describe the impact of parent ego state being around would be along the lines of, well, when you were talking with that person, did you feel a warm fuzzy, or did you feel a cold prickly? And you can see straight away the distinguishing between how a parent may come across is warm fuzzy, which is nurturing, or cold prickly, which is critical. And all of our interactions from parents in a real base sort of level will stem from one of those two places. Ever stood and find yourself talking to your own children with your hand on your hip and your finger pointing and telling them, well, hello, welcome to the world of critical parenting? Ever really felt a need or a compulsion to give someone a hug and tell them it's all gonna be okay, put your arm around the shoulder and want to mentor someone in that way? Well, that's the nurturing, affirming parent style.
And the other thing to mention as well is that the ego states will inform or instruct what I do externally, but also internally as well. So
yeah.
the critical voice, we've all got a critical voice inside our head. Whenever we talk about this to any of our clients, we all just sit everyone go, yeah, yeah, I'm quite self-critical. That's a standard human thing. So that internal critic can be quite loud. It can tell us all sorts of horrible things about ourselves, and we have a tendency to just believe it and take it as fact. You know, of course I'm a terrible human being. Everybody thinks that, and all those sorts of thoughts. We kind of go, and the critical, the easiest way to kind of determine the critical voice or recognize it is to think, would I say that to another human being? If the answer, and often the answer will be no. But if the answer is no, it's like, okay, that's the critical voice coming in. that's me kind of undermining myself and kind of telling myself how rubbish I am. And the nurturing voice can often be a lot quieter. Sometimes when we talk to people, we discover that the critical voice is so loud, so intense that nurturing voice has no way of breaking through. And part of it is learning to recognize that critical voice, what it tells you, what it says, how it says these things, and learn to ignore it, but learn to kind of turn the volume down on that voice. So that it's
also the permissions we give to it as well, isn't it? That critical voice. A classic example that I'll use with clients in therapy is, I remember being told this when we were in college, about scripts and narratives that we get from our families and the strength that they can carry over our life. So he's the black sheep of the family, you know, and we carry that and it informs part of us. But the example is of a dad who told both of his daughters that they will both end up in the loony bin. These are the exact words that the dad used. You will both end up in the loony bin, which is obviously a lovely affirming thing for a dad to say to his children. And the thing is, he was right. He was right. So daughter A went in as a patient, and daughter B went in as a psychiatric nurse. So they both ended up in the loony bin. They followed the narrative, but the interpretation is different. And we can come on to that a little bit next week, I think, in terms of how our adult state, which is where we kind of in an ideal world want to spend most of our time, being clear, present, and well-defined, helps us to inform. So the bit Nathan's talking about turning the volume down on some of the cold pricklies and allowing the sense of the warm fuzzies, that comes from elements of our different ego states coming into play. But the parental model is that bit where we follow the narrative, and sometimes where we create the narrative for other people as well. So actually it's good to be aware of our parenting style, and whether we are actually parents or not, we all have a parenting style because we parent ourselves, and that's what we're talking about here. Realistically, a lot of this sounds like it's outward projection stuff, but in reality it's our own internal monologue going through three separate filters of parent, adult, child. So I guess, you know, we're sort of coming to the end of the time that we would want to spend on this today. We've really only touched the surface of it, but some points for reflection could be along the lines of, well, how do I parent myself? What's my internal voice like to myself? Do I notice my internal voice? And when I hear it and I'm criticizing myself, does that sound like my dad? Is it an entirely different voice? You know, where's that coming from? Why do I criticize myself over the same things time and time again? Welcome to the parent ego state.
Yeah. One other thing that I think is important to mention is to be aware, or to try at least to be aware of the language we use when we talk about ourselves, or when we just generally are talking. If you ever catch yourself going, I should be doing this, I should be doing that, or I ought to, that's pretty much, you can guarantee that's critical parent coming out. And if you ever kind of feel like, oh, I should really go and wash up because, you know, that's bad. It's bad that I don't wash up. Not all shoulds are bad. Not all shoulds are bad. Not all shoulds are kind of are things we should rally against, but we should always question should again. It's really hard to talk without saying should when you're talking about shoulds. I think it's important to challenge a should and question it, because what you in this process you're trying to learn when, you know, those little tricks, those little things that happen, those little automatic behaviors that come from the parent that might be holding us back, that might be kind of getting in the way, might become barriers rather than being boundaries. That's something we haven't talked about, but having old behaviors we picked up from our youth, that's a child thing. We'll get to the child. But the parent can reinforce those decisions and those things. And so the language we use is really, really informative as to where we are and what we're doing and how we can convince ourselves through our voice to believe certain things about ourselves. And it's not until we recognize and realize, like, oh, actually, when I talk about myself, I always throw some negative language in there. Yeah. Or I'm always kind of like self-deprecating. Why do I do this? Because it's not helpful, so I'm just going to stop doing that. Easier said than done, but it's a path. It's beginning that kind of awareness of what it is I do and bringing that unconscious into the conscious so you can act on it.
And that's the key thing. A lot of this stuff is entirely unconscious in the way that we go about it. We don't even realize we're doing half the things that we do. As we go forward in terms of discussing this, we'll be aware perhaps that other people are more aware that we do it than we are ourselves, because we very much we leak all of this stuff. We leak our upbringing out into our conversations and our interactions with other people. So this whole process is about raising our levels of consciousness around our unconscious behavior. Why do we do the things we do? Why is shoulds and oughts important? Well, that's your own personal reflection, but we'll get to that point. I think that's enough to sort of scratch the surface of parent. There's tons more. Don't get me wrong.
Oh
There's
yeah,
tons
yeah.
More we could
go on for days just about the parent, but we won't.
We probably should.
There is more. Yes, probably. Yes, we should.
Yes,
we must. There's more information about transactional analysis, and this is referred to as the PAC model, the parent, adult, child. And there's the PAC model stuff on our website in the resources page. Thank you. So check that out. Google transactional analysis if you can spell it. I can't spell it. I really can't. It's one of those words I struggle to say it, let alone spell it. There's some really good stuff online. Not all of it's great, as usual. Some of it's workplace related stuff, because it's all about how groups can work together and stuff, so it's really useful. But yeah, dive into it. There's a book called Counseling for Toads, which I highly recommend to anybody out there, which is basically based in the world of Wind in the Willows, and Toad Hall goes into therapy, and he sees a transactional analysis therapist called Heron, who's the name of the guy who came up with them. Anyway, it's a therapist in joke.
It's a good book.
It's a great book. It's a really, really good book. I love it. So yeah, go away. And like I said previously, any questions, then do get in touch. We will respond to those, hopefully. No, we definitely will. There's no hopefully about it. You can do the contact stuff this time, Chris, because I did last.
Yeah, our website is cornerstonesw.co.uk. You can contact us via contact@cornerstonesw.co.uk. But this is video one. We're going to release another one next week, and then another one probably the week after, just to round off this little mini series on transactional analysis. So I've been Chris.
I've been Nathan.
And we are trying our hardest to not be parental, but be adult, clear, present, and well-defined, of which you will find out more next time.